I'd like to start out this series by covering the nuts and bolts of what it's going to take to get an app running on your iOS device. Publishing for the iOS is a huge topic. I mean, we could cover multiple video series on all the different things. There's performance and graphics and, getting through the App Store and how to get stuff on and off and multiplayer, and there's so much to cover that this series is going to focus specifically on using Playmaker to make applications and games for an iOS device. I will touch on all those other topics as much as is appropriate, but there still may be a lot of other stuff that I'm not going to get covered. But you will get a good solid foundation now, so if you need help or you need to expand somewhere, you'll know exactly where to go to find that little bit of information, because you're going to be able to get a whole lot of stuff running and working really well just from this tutorial series. All right, I think it's important to start out with a kind of a whirlwind tour of how you get from nowhere to an app running on the iOS. A lot of you may already have applications running on an iPhone or an iPad, and you're just looking to get more capability out of that, take advantage of what's there. And that's fine. Feel free to skip ahead into the next video, and we'll have all kinds of good stuff. For those of you who are brand new to it, this is your video. I'm going to take you on our little whirlwind tour and show you what it takes. What you need to get something published on the iOS. First of all, you're going to need Unity, of course, and I've got it running right here, as you see. And let me clarify here. You actually need a particular version of Unity. Here we are on their website, and this is recorded in early 2012, so, the website may be different by now, and I'm certainly not trying to show it to you, but if you go here to the download Unity, in this case it's 3.5 at the time I'm recording this, and you download it for free, it's very awesome that they give you this for free. It'll do a ton of stuff, but it won't publish to iOS. This is for OS X, Windows, and web. And then sometimes there's a little trial, like right now there's a Flash preview or something built in. Basically, the free one lets you do OS X, OS X, Windows, and web embedded. What you really need in order to get something onto an iOS device, if you select, like I selected Unity Free, and it rolls down here and says, hey, why don't you add features? You can add the Android version, the iOS version. In this case, this right here is what you need, the iOS version. And the sad thing is you'll probably be seeing this after April 8th when it's no longer free. So hopefully you got in on that deal before that was over with. It's a heck of a deal. The iOS version is what you need. Once it's embedded, it's still the same editor. It doesn't add any new funky program or anything. It just gives you the back-end functionality to get onto an iOS device. That's what you need. iOS Pro would also work, but in order to get Pro, you need to have Unity Pro first, and that would allow you to get there. So it's kind of this step up, Unity, and then Unity iOS, and then Unity Pro, and then Unity iOS Pro. The basic one will get you there. This just gives you, some other features you may or may not need. If you're just starting out, you probably totally won't need anything on this, at least for a while. That's an important distinction. A lot of people don't pick it up, but there it is. Same thing if you want to publish on an Android, you're going to need one of these. If you want to publish on the 360, you're going to need their options for that. So on and so forth. Now, the next thing, of course, you're going to need Playmaker. And I'm going to assume that since you found this video series, you already have Playmaker installed. You're already ready. I'm not going to talk much about that. Just give them a good round of applause anytime you see them, and we'll thank them and move on. The next thing is you're going to need to register as an Apple developer. At the time I recorded this, it was about $100 a year. Really not a big deal. If you've already invested in Playmaker and or Unity and iOS, you're right there. It's so affordable to be able to be an Apple developer. It's incredible. You come here to this website, developer.apple.com, at the time of the recording. It's been this way for a few years, so probably stay for a while. And you register to be an Apple developer. And once you do that, you can go into the iOS Dev Center. And in the iOS Dev Center, you will be able to set up all of the things you need for publishing to an iOS device, You can get access to, articles and sample code and all kinds of crazy stuff that you may or may not need if you're using Playmaker. It's a wealth of great stuff, okay? So register for that. It's pretty easy to do. There's lots of online help if you need to just walk you through this thing. And once you're registered as an Apple developer, you'll have the ability to download Xcode 4. Xcode it's kind of like Visual Studio is to the PC world. This is a development suite that lets you program applications just from scratch. It's really powerful, it's really amazing, and it's also completely free. Well, not free, it comes free with your $100 yearly membership to the Apple developer subscription. But once you get it, use it for free on that. There's no more fees, none of that. And you won't be using this directly to write any code in if you're using Unity and Playmaker, but Unity and Playmaker push things into Xcode, which then does the final step of pushing it onto your iOS device. So it is important that you get this and have it installed. You don't download it off the web anymore, you used to. Now you get it from the Mac App Store. It'll walk you through all this, you click on it, and it's kind of big. I think it's a gigabyte or so be prepared for, a download depending on your speed. It could be a couple hours or more in order to get it downloaded and installed and whatever. Or it might be really fast depending where you're at. Anyway, you're going to need Xcode 4. All right, we've got all that covered. Once you're set up as an Apple developer, there's 4 steps you're going to need to take, and I'm going to go over them really quick because this is where I think the most confusion comes in for people. First, you need to register all of your devices. And all that means is a fancy way of saying you need to tell Apple, like, I'm using this particular iPhone or this particular iPad, this particular iPod in order to develop my games. This just makes sure that people can't come, like a friend comes over to wherever you're working and plugs in their iPhone and gets the app that somebody's developing and then runs down the street, shows it to all kinds of people. Make sure that that can't happen. It means only authorized devices are able to work. And it doesn't change anything on your device when you do. If it's the one you carry around all day, like probably is, it's not going to change its functions. It's not going to suddenly turn it into a business thing that breaks your contract with your carrier. It's none of that. It's going to be fine. So just register it so Apple can authorize it when you put your apps on it. The next thing you do is set up an app ID for your game. And this one, it looks kind of like a web address backwards. The format it uses is com.yourname, your company name, your game name. And this sounds a little weirder than it is, but it's really pretty easy. If your company is called Awesome Studios and your new game is called Space Shooter, then your app ID you could choose is com.awesomestudio.spaceshooter. Pretty easy. You'll always have the company name be the same. It's whatever you register with Apple as. That one's fixed every time. But the game name can be whatever you want it. This is something that the users will never see when they buy your game or your application. It just is a way to make sure that what are there, 1.5 billion apps now on the App Store? And we just have to make sure that we don't all start using the same name. And this is the way that everybody can keep them tracked separately behind the scenes. Once again, this is not the name of your game that the user will see. This is the name, a system name behind the scenes. So next you need a developer certificate, and that's just really simply a thing that, it's this little invisible file that says you're authorized by Apple to work on Apple-based products. Nice and easy. And it all comes together in the 4th step, which is creating a provisioning profile for your game. And that simply means you create a provisioning profile. It says, what app IDs do I want to use, and which devices, and which developer certificates, which is those 3 things that we just talked about. Out of all that stuff you set up, because you may have, an iPod and an iPad, and maybe you're making a game only for iPad. So one provisioning profile wouldn't use the iPod, it would just use the iPad. And maybe you want both of them on another game. This is just a provisioning profile for each game that puts together the combination of people working on it, what devices it's on, and what the ID is. Hopefully that made a lot of sense to you. Once you go through the process, Apple has a really nice website for doing it. It should be clean and easy. And once you've set it up once, you're done. It's over with. Works easy. You have to make a new app ID and a new provisioning profile every time you make a new game, but that's it. All right, let's set up Unity now that we've got that stuff out of the way and make our very first Playmaker-based iOS game. I'll use game very loosely, but it'll be a thing running on the iOS, and so that's pretty awesome. Let's go to it. Let's start off coming up here to the Edit menu in Unity and come down to Project Settings. And some of this has fallen off the page. I'm sorry about that due to the screen size I'm capturing at. And choose Player. We're going to edit Project Settings, Player. Okay. And that'll pop up here in the inspector. And Player isn't, the player, like the person playing your game. It's the thing that's playing your game back to them, the format in which the game is being run. If you scroll down, there's a lot of options here. The first important thing to look at is your company name you put in there, product name, whatever you want to call it. And a default icon is pretty easy. You can just drag an icon in here out of an image well. Like if you come into something like this, you can drag it on out and drop it right there. Down here, per platform settings is where it starts getting interesting because it's individual for each platform. So there's settings for a web player, settings for the PC and Mac standalone, and here is settings for iOS. Finally here, this is settings for the Flash Player preview, which at the time I'm recording this was included. Settings for iOS is what we'll talk about today. This is where you set up a lot of particulars like the resolution, default orientation. So our options here, portrait means when you're holding your iPad straight up and down as if you're reading a book. Portrait upside down, pretty self-explanatory, you flipped it upside down. Landscape right and landscape left means you're laying it on its side. And you might think that like landscape left means that the button and the plug is on the left, but it doesn't. It means the top. All of these are relevant to the top. It's like portrait means top up. Portrait upside down means top down. So you can just apply that logic. Landscape right means top to the right. Landscape left means top to the left. I'm going to choose landscape right, which means the button will be on the left. Statusbar hidden, I won't go into too much of this right now because it doesn't really matter. And some of this stuff, if you don't know what it is like this, just don't even click it. Leave it alone and it all should work by default really nicely. Icon is a list, and I've dropped these in. It's a list of different sized icons, and I'll touch on this a little more later. There's a lot of different icon sizes now between all the different devices. Some of these are for on-screen, like when you tap the button. Some of them are for the App Store. Some are for, there's all kinds of different sizes you'll need. That's where you can set icons, and again, just drag them into these image wells. Splash image, if you want to change the startup screen, this is how you do it. And you remember those resolutions I just talked about earlier? Portrait, landscape, all that. These are different for portrait and landscape, so you can have a different one. And again, high-res iPhone, mobile splash screen. This is just like the icons. There's different sizes based on what device you're using. You know, do you have a Retina display? Do you have a 3GS with the standard display? All these different options. Again, if you leave them blank, it's fine. Doesn't matter for now. Other settings is very important. You remember that name we talked about making? com.yourbusinessname.yourgamename? That goes right in here. Let me stretch this out a little bit so you can kind of see. I have set up com.wellplayedgames. You pretty much guessed that because that's the name of the company. And generic test app is the name of the game. And I made this just so I can always throw this in and test any scene I'm working on. And I don't have to like re-register with Apple every time or whatever. This is just my throwaway test name. This is a test game I use on tons and tons of different things when I'm just throwing it together or trying stuff out. I'd suggest you come up with something like that. Put the name of the app right here in the bundle identifier. And it's got to go in this order and nothing else, just that. This is just the version number of your game. It doesn't really matter what you set it at right now. And again, you can set up for target devices, but let's leave all of this alone for right now because it's going to work by default as it stands just fine right now. Close that up a little bit again. All right, so let's make our first cheesy little scene here and have a little fun with this and show you how it works. I've got an empty scene, and I'm going to go ahead and do the almighty cube. Let's make a game object, create other cube. There it is in all its cubic glory. And if I look in the project, I've got some crate textures I made, because why not? Time to crate equals whatever right now is. I'm going to drag on this crate texture. And in the inspector, I'm going to change this really quick. Oh no, I've already got it set up. Unlit texture is what I want. It's kind of off the screen. If I left it at diffuse, it'd be all dark, and it means you have to have a light in your scene, and you want to really try to avoid lights as much as possible on a mobile device. Unlit texture, this is going to work for right now. All right, now I want to show you one more thing where we can set specific iPhone or platform settings. With my texture selected here, I come into the inspector. You see it's got these same little tabs that we had before. Web, standalone, which means PC and Mac, iPhone, and Flash Player. And right here is a default setting for it. It's a texture. You could set it up to be prepared as one of these other things, but this is indeed a texture. I'm going to override for iPhone. Just select that. And this is a 256 by 256 texture already, but maybe you had made it at, say, 1024 by 1024 for an iPad or a PC game or something. And you could come in here and override the texture size, and that would make sure that it only ever gets exported at 256. It would get scaled down automatically by Unity. This is a way for each platform, like you could have here, you could leave it at 1024 if that's what it were original, but come over here, it would be at 256. I'm going to turn that off because that's not the case. We don't need it. And you can also adjust compression quality and all of that. When you're done, just apply. Again, not a huge thing. You know, this is another area where you could really spend a lot of time. For right now, I want you to just know that it's really important and really worth your while to scale down your textures here, because without that, you could see some pretty terrible performance if you're putting really big textures on there without needing to. There's that. Let's pick our camera and make sure that we're pointing at our almighty amazing cube. Actually, I think we're off. Yeah, set this back at 0, 0, 0 real quick so that the camera can actually look. There we go. That's a little better squared up view. Roll the camera down. Make it pretty big. I think that'll be fine. We just need something on there so we know what to point at. And let's go ahead and add an FSM to this cube. Call it rotate. If you've seen my other series, you've seen this a million times, so I won't waste a lot of time on it. There we go. Let's do it around the Y angle at about a rate of 25. We'll do that per second and preview it really quick. So we're just going to have a spinning cube. Nothing much, but it'll be enough to show us that we made it over to the iOS device and it works. I'm going to save this into scenes, and we'll call this Cube 1. And that should be good. Let's look now at File, Build Settings. This window, there's a couple buttons spilling off the bottom, but that's okay. You'll see it when you open your own. I've got this set to iOS by default. If you don't have that, yours might be set to PC and Mac standalone. You can click iOS, and right down here, you can look right off your screen. Right down here in the lower left, there's a button called Switch Platform. And click that, and it'll take a minute or so, but it'll switch over from PC Mac to iOS. It'll change the project to be an iOS project. That is all you need to do for setting that up, but it's important that you make that change right away. And then with this scene selected, I'm going to add current, and that gets into our scenes to build. Okay, lists it right there. And if you had anything else in there, you could click and highlight and press delete to get rid of it. So if you have a test scene or something you don't want to use anymore, you can get rid of it that way. But Go ahead and add that in there. I'm going to close that. And when you look again under File, we had build settings right here. There's also build and run. And there is Command B. Let's go ahead and click that or use Command B. It keeps putting the stuff in the middle. I have a 27-inch screen. It keeps moving things out here to the middle, but you'll see what I'm doing there. And it is setting up the project and getting ready to push it over into Xcode. This takes a little bit of time, but it's not too bad. As your project gets bigger, it could take a little while, and the first time you compress textures and things like that, it can be a while to do all this build process. Don't worry about it. I usually go get a drink or something if it starts getting slow. Now this is Xcode, and it'll give you an update. It says the build has succeeded. Let's go ahead and getting it all ready to push over to my iPad. And right here is a list. It's got iPadius listed, which is what I've named my iPad. If for some reason it comes over here and doesn't find your device, you can pick it out of this pop-up list right there like that, and then press run to get it to start up again. Now there's all kinds of stuff going on in this window, all kinds of things to see around. Xcode is really, really deep. If you don't know what you're doing with any of this, you don't understand it, please don't touch it. Leave it alone. A lot of it isn't relevant to what's going on. It's just there as an option for a developer. Some of it is relevant, and you really shouldn't change it. If there comes a time, it's not that hard to get around in, but until then, I really recommend just leaving it alone and let it do its progress bar game, and you'll go ahead and move on. And I promise the rest of the series I will not sit through this process. We'll jump right to the iPad running. I just wanted you to step through it the first time. So there it says it's running the app, and it's firing up over on our iPad. There's a splash screen. Oh, there's a nice little message. And there is our cube rotating in all its glory. Sorry about that little alert message. I'll remember to turn those off. But pretty easy. There it is. That's the app running away on our iPad. And it's doing exactly what we expected. It was completely painless and fairly easy. This is the process you use to get everything set up. One thing, you can quit the app. It's really got a connection. That cable right there is what I'm pushing it through, and it's still running live connected to Xcode right here. Okay, the cube's not just sitting there alone. I can kill this over here, and it's going to ask me if I try to say quit. It'll say, "Are you sure you want to close that project?" And if I choose stop tasks, it will kill the task on the iPad. And if I just close it on the iPad, then it goes back to the regular iPad screen, but there's still some kind of connection. See, it says, "Do you still want to stop it?" Yeah, I do. You go ahead and clean that up, and you can relaunch it, because once it's pushed onto the iPad, it's there. You'll probably find it on your first or second screen, depending on where it placed it. And you can relaunch it. And there's our spinning cube again, launching again. So now that app is on your iPad. You can take it with you and do whatever you want. From now on, when you push a build over there, it's going to update that app and just replace what's there every time. But if you unplug it, carry it around with you, you want to show it to other people and test it out, that's how it is. So that, I think, is enough for the getting started. That was a lot to cover in a very whirlwind sort of fashion. And like I said, I touched on everything, but I didn't cover everything in huge detail because there's so much detail, and some of it won't apply to you. Sometimes it'll work great, and sometimes you'll have special needs. But now you know the soup to nuts. You know where to look if you have a special case need. And really, give yourself an hour or two to set this up the first time. Go ahead and push it through. And I really suggest just set through an empty project or a spinning cube or something. Don't try something fancy the first time. And make sure that the basic system works, and then start building complexity in. And once that's in place, you are empowered to build all kinds of crazy stuff. With that, let's end this video and move on to all the great things Playmaker can do for us in the iOS.